How often the audience you speak to consider your work, academic work, as an insult to their faith?
Usually that's only when I'm doing a public debate. Because usually when I do a debate, it's almost always with an conservative evangelical Christian.
Yeah.
But I love that thing you do to disarm them, where you say, "How many are here to see me get
Exactly.
creamed?" Yeah.
He did that with Craig Evans.
So in those contexts, I mean, when I debated Kyle Butt, we were it was in northern Alabama.
Oh,
And
yeah.
everybody in the audience was from the Church of Christ, which is a very conservative Christian denomination. And they were polite. They were polite.
Yeah.
So that was good. But they were out for blood. They really wanted me to go down.
Yes.
Laughing every time he made a ridiculous point. It was so hard to listen to. They're like hard to tell.
Well, Dr. Ehrman, about 1 John 5:7
Yes.
in King James Version, it exists like the testimony in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Spirit. And in the New Revised Standard Version, it is omitted.
Yes.
So how do Christians see? Do you think they see there's like the verse has been omitted as an addition, as a forgery, or they just stick to the version they have?
Some do. Fundamentalists think it's original, and most other Christians think there's a later edition.
Okay. I mean, I remember reading for Professor Bruce Metzger that he said that the most ancient manuscript that had this verse dates back to the 16th century.
Yes.
And it was considered as a textual errata.
Yes.
So my question is like how nowadays like you can bring two versions of the Bible, two translations to a Christian, to a committed practicing Christian.
Yeah.
This talks about the Trinity and this does not.
Yes.
So how do they justify still believing in Trinity?
Oh, because the doctrine of the Trinity isn't based on a single verse.
It's not.
No. I mean, there aren't any Christian doctrines that are just based on a verse. Christian doctrines are based on looking at the wide range of authorities, including biblical authorities, so that the doctrine of the Trinity is because there are places where you have the Father, the Son, and the Spirit that are mentioned, like in Matthew 28. And there are passages that show that Christ is God, and there are passages that show that the Spirit is God. And so if you've got Father, Son, and Spirit, and they all can be shown. So they just
mix them up together and they come
trying
up
to justify a monotheistic religion.
You develop a theology based on a wide. If you're a biblically oriented person, you base your theology on a wide range of biblical texts, not just on one verse. That's why. When I do these debates about whether we have the original New Testament, and Dan Wallace says, there's not a cardinal doctrine of Christianity that depends on any textual variant. And that's convincing to people. They think, oh, well how about that, huh? How about that, huh? And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, that's absolutely true, but so what? I mean, that's not what I'm talking about.
I mean,
that's also like you can just say that there's no cardinal Christian doctrine that's based on the books of Numbers, 1 Peter, and Hebrews. But what if you woke up tomorrow morning and your Bibles didn't have Numbers, 1 Peter, and Hebrews? Would you think that was significant? No, it wouldn't matter at all because there's no Christian. No, of course you'd think, oh my God, we're missing these books.
Well, Craig Evans said in his debate with you, it doesn't matter. I mean, the mistakes are not that impacting. I was saying today we had the chance to meet one of the most recognized critics of the New Testament, Dr. Bart Ehrman. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed our time together.
Well, it's been a great chance. The question is that throughout your work, like for 40 years, we noticed that your main problem about trust in the Bible and the authenticity of the Bible is the technique of transmission, which is we don't have the originals. We don't know who wrote the Bible or who are the scribes who copied the manuscripts. There is a parallel transmission technique in transmitting the holy verses or the holy scriptures, which is followed by the Muslims, by transmitting the Quran and the traditions of their prophet. Have you ever considered looking at their techniques in transmission, because they do claim that it is unirritable?
Right. So the first thing I'll say is that's one of the reasons that I've had trouble with traditional Christianity, is because of the changes that scribes have made in the text. But it's not the only thing. Another issue is the internal discrepancies that you find within the New Testament and within the Bible, and I do know that the Quran has been faithfully transmitted over the centuries, and for some reason Christians decided not to transmit their book as faithfully. But what I would say is that they certainly could have if they had wanted to. Jews, of course, through the Middle Ages transcribed the Hebrew Bible faithfully, and for some reason Christians just didn't do that. There's not really not a lot to be done with the Quran, because I mean so many of these manuscripts are just the same. So there's not a lot of scholarship to do, because I mean with the New Testament though you have all these thousands of manuscripts that are all different from each other. So that makes the scholarship more interesting.
Well, speaking about the publicity of your work, definitely, if it's compared to your professor, Bruce Metzger, you can notice that you have a wider audience than the time. Do you think that the reason for that is that people are more interested in discovering the historical side of the Bible, whether we should trust it or not as historically?
So Bruce Metzger was very interested in the history of early Christianity and was quite an expert in the history of early Christianity, and I started getting interested myself in the history of Christianity by studying with Bruce Metzger. I think the difference is that I have intentionally written books for general audiences, books that are meant to be published more broadly, and he tended to write more books for scholars. And so I think he didn't have as broad of an audience for that reason.
Well, in your post yesterday, you mentioned that there is like books for trade and books for general audience and books for PhD students and grad students. How do you view, or how do you deal, or how you argue a certain or the same info on each level, the audience, the trade, and the grad?
Right. So I think for different audiences you have to write at different levels, and so with scholars you can assume certain levels of jargon. There are certain assumptions that you can make. You don't have to explain what your assumptions are. If you're writing for a general audience, of course people aren't trained in the field, and so they don't understand a lot of the assumptions that are, and so you have to explain a lot more. And so it isn't that the ideas necessarily are simpler. It's just that the explanations have to be simpler.
Well, thank you very much. You know how long I've been waiting for this day.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Eirman.
Thank you.